Saturday Night Live just obliterated Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, and the internet is losing it.
A new trade deal with the UK that will reopen British markets for American companies. All that Britain demands in return is that we keep these two.
Yep. SNL joked the royal family wants America to keep Harry and Meghan in permanently. Fans say the roast was savage, but others think it's just another shot at a couple trying to live in peace. So, was this hilarious or just harsh?
It all went down live. Yup, live. No takebacks, no edits. Just Colin standing center stage like a lion with a mic, and Meghan's carefully curated image about to be torn limb by limb. He didn't just poke fun at her, he ripped through the narrative she spent years building like a chainsaw through tissue paper.
Welcome back to Clout Therapy, the place where we pull back the curtain on Hollywood's fakest stories. Tonight, we're diving into the wild fall of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, how they went from royal fairy tale to late-night comedy punching bags. We're talking SNL roasting them, comedians dragging their Netflix doc, and an internet that just won't let up. And trust me, it's not just harmless jokes. These punchlines are torching their brand in real time. So grab your tea, because we're breaking down exactly how the Sussexes lost the crowd, why Hollywood's turning on them, and what it means for their future. If you live for celebrity chaos, hit subscribe and buckle up. This is Clout Therapy. The tipping point came on Saturday Night Live. Colin Jost stood there with that smirk and dropped the line, "Britain demands we keep Harry and Meghan." The audience roared, but the laugh had an edge. It felt less like a joke and more like a verdict. This was the moment the Sussexes officially became trade bait punchlines. Then came the Elon Musk comparison. Jost doubled down, saying it was like giving up a throne to marry a Suits actress. And that hit differently, because it boiled down the entire Harry and Meghan saga into one brutal analogy, throwing away centuries of royal power for Hollywood clout. Ouch doesn't even cover it. Now, here's what makes this so important. Saturday Night Live has always taken swings at them. At Meghan's wedding, they painted Harry as an unemployed dude still living with his grandma. Later, when Suits wrapped, they joked about a spin-off called Married to Royalty. But back then, the tone was playful. It was poking fun at a couple the world still saw as glamorous, almost untouchable. The kind of royals who made late-night writers sharpen their pens but still carried that glow of a fairy tale. But fast forward to now, and the glow is gone. The comedy doesn't treat them like royalty anymore. It treats them like internet content. Memes, sound bites, clickbait. Jost wasn't celebrating them, he was cashing them in. And that's the shift. The very stage that once teased their fairy tale turned around and declared them a farce. When SNL, the cultural barometer of what's cool and what's cringe, stops laughing with you and starts laughing at you, that's when the brand is in trouble. Hollywood didn't just laugh from the sidelines. They stepped into the ring and threw punches of their own. At the Golden Globes, Joe Coy didn't hold back. In a room full of Hollywood's biggest names, he cracked, "Harry and Meghan are still getting paid millions for doing nothing." And the timing of that jab mattered. These weren't fans on Twitter laughing it off. This was in front of actors, directors, producers, people who claw their way up in one of the toughest industries on earth. For Meghan and Harry, who have built their entire brand on hard work and telling their truth, that one-liner was a public gut punch. Because in Hollywood, there's no bigger insult than being called talentless. And it didn't stop there. Trevor Noah on The Daily Show poked fun at Harry needing a job. Jimmy Kimmel piled on with his brutal twist. They fled racism by moving to America? That joke hit harder than it seemed, because it flipped their whole narrative on its head. Instead of brave rebels escaping the palace, comedians painted them as clueless hypocrites. That's when the pattern became clear. The Sussexes had gone from royal rebels to Hollywood's running gag. Their giant Netflix deal, their constant interviews, their victimhood narrative, it had all turned into comedy fuel. They weren't seen as brave anymore. They were seen as cashing checks while complaining about the spotlight they kept walking back into. And that's deadly in Hollywood, because once your image becomes a punchline, it sticks. And then came the pettier stuff, the kind of mocking that stings more because it's so specific. Stephen Colbert casually reducing them to M and H, stripping away the grandeur and turning them into a sitcom couple. Jimmy Fallon making Meghan's repackaging food moment on her Netflix show into a running joke. Like, really? Pretzels in Ziploc bags? That's your big humanitarian content? And James Corden, who once positioned himself as their friend, letting a guest come on and claim Meghan ruined her yoga studio just by constantly name-dropping. That wasn't just comedy anymore. That was Hollywood insiders rolling their eyes, saying out loud what people whispered privately. Meghan and Harry were exhausting. And that's the real shift. When comedians mock you, you can laugh it off. But when your own peers in Hollywood, the same circle you're trying desperately to break into, start airing their annoyance, that's not mystique. That's not glamour. That's cringe. It was the moment Meghan and Harry stopped being seen as a royal power couple and started being treated like the Kardashians without the charm. In just a few years, the fairy tale had crumbled into a punchline. And in Hollywood, once you're branded as hypocrisy wrapped in entitlement, the laughs don't stop. They just get louder. Stand-up comedians didn't just roast Harry and Meghan. They slaughtered them. Ricky Gervais, the king of calling out privilege, stood on stage and cut right to the bone. The royals never pay for anything. That one line summed up centuries of entitlement. But in this case, it pointed straight at Harry, a man who walked away from the crown but still cashes in on his name. The laugh it got wasn't just funny, it was exposing. Then John Mulaney took his swing. With his signature deadpan delivery, he painted Harry as the guy who quit the ultimate job too early. He could have just waited for grandma to pass. That joke landed heavy, because beneath the humor was a truth. Most people couldn't believe Harry walked away from being king in waiting just to chase a Hollywood dream. And then came the raw, unfiltered roasts. Tim Dillon didn't dress it up. He called Meghan insufferable and Harry a dumb ginger. No sympathy, no sugarcoating, just blunt humiliation. And as savage as that was, Chris Rock may have hit the hardest. On his Netflix special, he dismantled Meghan's big Oprah racism bombshell. He told the crowd, "That's not racist." Even black people ask how brown the baby's gonna be. The audience roared because Rock said out loud what many were already whispering, that Harry and Meghan's most dramatic accusation wasn't landing with everyone. It went from shocking revelation to punchline overnight. And across the pond, British comedian Simon Brodkin stripped away all pretense. After hearing their side of the story, he told the crowd flat out, "I fucking hate them." That wasn't satire. That was a declaration. The stand-up world wasn't just mocking Harry and Meghan. They were annihilating their credibility, turning scandal into comedy and sympathy into scorn. And just when it seemed like the humiliation couldn't get any worse, the cartoons joined in. South Park, famous for torching celebrities past the point of return, aired the now legendary worldwide privacy tour. Harry and Meghan marching around, holding signs and megaphones, screaming about privacy while hopping on private jets and cashing Netflix checks. It wasn't a sketch, it was a cultural death sentence. Because when South Park dedicates an entire episode to you, it means your image has fully crossed over from reality to ridicule. And they didn't stop there. They took shots at Harry's memoir, Spare, painting him as a whiny oversharer desperate for attention. The audience laughed, but the subtext was brutal. The royal fairy tale was gone, replaced by two people seen as clowns. Even Family Guy threw them into the mix with those quick-fire digs. One gag summed it up perfectly. Millions from Netflix. And no one knows what they actually do. That's the legacy. Once the cartoons immortalize you as archetypes, you're no longer glamorous, no longer mysterious. You're caricatures, walking contradictions who live forever as jokes in reruns. And that's the cruel truth. Harry and Meghan didn't just lose control of their narrative, They became content. And in pop culture, once you're reduced to a cartoon, the laughs last forever, but the respect never comes back. Harry's biggest enemy wasn't SNL or South Park or the stand-up comics. It was himself. Just look at his interview with Stephen Colbert. There's the infamous good knowledge moment where Harry tries to play off a profound quote and completely fumbles it. The crowd laughed, but not with him, at him. Then there was that awkward tension in the interview, little flashes of bitterness where Harry seemed annoyed at Colbert's jokes instead of rolling with them. It made him look stiff, humorless, out of touch. And then came the memoir. Spare was supposed to be his truth, but instead, it gave the world cringe lines like the fun grenade story, moments that sounded less like honesty and more like a parody of oversharing. Add in his complaints about paying for his own security while living in a Montecito mansion, and suddenly the narrative flipped. At some point, it wasn't comedians tearing him down anymore. It was Harry himself handing them the script. And that leads us to the bigger lesson. Because this was never really about Meghan's yoga studio or Harry's embarrassing book quotes. It was about contradictions. The Sussex brand is built on them, declaring war on the media while desperately chasing its spotlight, positioning themselves as victims while living in absolute privilege, branding themselves as authentic truth tellers while every move feels curated, packaged, and painfully manufactured. And comedy, at its core, doesn't create those contradictions. It amplifies them. It takes what people already feel in their gut and spits it back out with a punchline. That's why the joke stuck. That's why the laughter turned into ridicule. In the court of public opinion, mockery became the verdict. And for Harry and Meghan, once the world starts laughing at you,